Thank you all so much for joining us for session 1 of We the People Competition Bootcamp. We are really excited to offer this program for the first time, and thank you all so much for being here as part of this cohort. This is a multi-session event, so tonight obviously is session 1, and we will meet again 2 times more, and we look forward to getting to know you and getting to work with you over the course of those 3 sessions. So thank you again for spending your time with us during your prep for the school year. All right, so for tonight, we have a session that's going to go about 75 to 90 minutes, depending on how many questions you all may have. Tonight, we're going to overview the objectives for the whole teacher, We the People Teacher Competition Bootcamp. We'll introduce ourselves, all of your 3 lovely presenters, and we'll be kicking in tonight to the ideas of transitioning from classroom to competition. And we'll be talking a bit about the key skills and knowledge that your students will be building over the course of their We the People prep. Right. So first things first, our overview of the entire boot camp. So our objectives, as Megan and Ashley and I were talking about what we wanted this We the People boot camp to be, we wanted to be able to reach folks who had some familiarity with We the People as a curriculum, who may have tried the simulated congressional hearing in class, and who may have competed at a state level competition before. A lot of us who are here today are really just getting our feet wet and just getting used to the idea of the simulated congressional hearing. So we wanted this boot camp to feel very comfortable for you and feel very approachable. So first things first, we really want you to be able to have fun with We the People and make it a tool that you can use with confidence in your classroom with your students. The other things we love for you to be able to get out of this over the course of 3 sessions is understanding why you might go the extra step to use the simulated congressional hearing. So you can use We the People in class. As you all know very well, you can pick and choose the lessons that you like that fit with your curriculum. But why should you go the extra mile to do the simulated hearing, especially in a competitive setting? So we're going to talk about why it's worth it for both you and your students. We would love for you to be able to identify some of the key skills and knowledge that are really going to help the students from the perspective of learners. These are going to be key skills and knowledge that we are not asking them to walk in the door with, but key skills and knowledge that they will develop over the course of the time working with the program. We are going to explore effective strategies to support student prep and performance. Ashley and Megan, who you'll meet in just a minute, they have been doing this program for over a decade. And so one of the things that you learn as a We the People teacher is a lot of trial and error. What works really well, and what doesn't work very well. So we're going to explore some of the things that we've learned over the course of prepping students to do a simulated congressional hearing and share all of those things with you. We're also going to talk a great deal about resources and tools that you can use to help your students prepare, but resources and tools that are good for you as an instructor. So we'll get into that at mostly session 3, but we have a lot of tips and tricks to share. And lastly, we want to ensure that we are fostering a collaborative network of teachers. So We the People, by its nature, the simulated congressional hearing competition, it starts to feel very big and scary. And we do not want this to feel very big and scary. We want us to feel like we're collaborative, we are a bunch of teacher learners together, and we are here to have the best possible experience for our students. So by the time we finish session 3, we are going to be able to talk about some shared resources and some shared spaces where we can continue to share resources even after we're done. All right. So for this evening, so we have a group tonight of about 16 participants. Anytime you have a question, please feel free to pop that in the chat. We will make sure that we address it either right away or address it during a Q&A session. And if you would like to answer a question or ask a question out loud, please feel free to use the raise hand feature. We are easily able to manage both. So this is content that's meant for you, so we want it to be useful for you. So please make sure you ask as much as you need, and we'll clarify as much as we can. All right, so with that being said, we'll introduce ourselves, and then we'd like to learn a little bit more about you. Megan.
Good evening, everyone. It's great to see you here. My name is Megan Boyman-Hennies. I am a We the People teacher, high school teacher in Fort Thomas, Kentucky. I teach at Highlands High School. This is going to be my 17th year when students come back tomorrow. And of those 17 years, I've been teaching the We the People curriculum for 16 of them. At my school, we have a special class set aside for the We the People competitive team that's also this year going to be cross-listed with AP US Government and Politics. And then I'm very excited because I'm also spearheading the rollout of the We the People curriculum to all of our on-level government courses as well, working with 2 other teachers in our building to ensure that all students have access to quality civic education and get that really personal, real-world experience that simulated congressional hearings can give them. I believe in this program with all of my heart. I'm sure every one of us here tonight has had that moment in our teaching career, maybe every year. Like February is always really hard. If we don't deny it, it's okay. And this is the class working with students in this format, competitive or otherwise, that always brings me back to teaching. And I'm just really excited to share what I've learned, hopefully answer some questions. And I know there's a lot to learn from you as well.
Thanks, Megan. Ashley.
Hi, everyone. I'm Ashley Vasic. This picture perfectly encapsulates the excitement that this is the last night that I have to take care of 14 teenagers, and also the experience and the excitement of We the People. So I've been teaching since 2009, so I'm getting ready to start my 15th year. I've been involved with the We the People program for the last 14 years, and my students have won the last 8 consecutive Maryland State Championships. This program is, I guess in a word, this program is my heart and soul. I think that we all have something in teaching that we can look back on and say, like, this is the thing that gives me purpose. This is the thing that makes me love what I do. And We the People is that for me. And I love to foster that in students. When the program first started at my school, it was integrated into the AP US Government curriculum. But for those of you that teach that course, when they did the redesign and all the writing changes and everything, I was like, oh Lord. So it is a standalone class in my building now as well. And I'm just really excited to get to know you all. And one of the things that I love about this teaching profession is that sharing is caring and collaboration is key. And I'm really excited to build that really collaborative network of We the People teachers. And kind of echoing what Emily said further, the biggest thing we want you to get out of this is to love the program more and to really want to kind of dip those toes into the competitive aspect, because while the curriculum is fantastic and you can learn so much, the hearings are just incredible project-based learning for your students. And it will really bring your kids alive more than you ever expected.
Thanks, Ashley. All right. And lastly, I will introduce myself. My name is Emily Voss. I'm the Senior Manager of National Programs and Professional Development at the Center for Civic Ed. Part of what I do is I organize the We the People National and the National Invitational competitions and a variety of other things. But prior to joining the center team last year, I was the Virginia state coordinator for We the People for 10 years. So I trained teachers for 10 years and ran our state competition. So I got to see the teachers from the very early stages of just being introduced to the curriculum to the point where they were involved in the state level competitions. And then some, of course, went to nationals. So the way that this, as Ashley and Megan have pointed out, the way that this lights up teachers and lights up students, I've never seen anything like it. So this is one of the reasons I absolutely love it, and I'm excited to do this with you. Alrighty, so now let's get to know you. So I think since we do have, I think we're up to 17, we have 17 folks here. I think we are safe to go ahead and use the chat. So if you would, please go ahead and put in the chat your school, your state, how many years you've been working with We the People. This has nothing to do with competition, but just how many years have you been using the curriculum? And then what you're hoping to gain from boot camp. So that's quite a few things to address. We'll give you a moment to jot that in the chat, but we look forward to meeting you here in just a moment. And if anyone is feeling particularly brave, you are welcome to take yourself off mute and introduce yourself that way. Okay, Robert Fulton College Prep, LAUSD North. I have not worked with We the People. I'm interested because you are teaching 12th grade government. Welcome to 12th grade government. We are really excited you're here. Amanda, Idaho Science and Technology Charter, middle 6th and 8th. Excellent. Dedicated classes. Love it. This will be my 5th year. Still feel like a baby in the program. So much to learn. Well, we are so excited to have you with us. Thank you. Shannon from Florida, East Pasco Education Academy. No experience yet. Middle school civics. Awesome. Hi, Elisa. We have a few Center for Civic Education folks joining us, including Elisa, whose kids go to LAUSD. Cody High School, Wyoming, 5 years teaching We the People. Excellent. Fawn Cameron from Michigan, Saginaw Valley State University, and you're majoring. This is fantastic.
Yay!
We're so glad you're joining us as a pre-service teacher.
Yes, that's awesome. And Karen, you must have the most beautiful views out your classroom. I'm convinced Wyoming is the most beautiful state.
William Dandy Middle School, Florida, pre-law 6th to 8th grade. Wow, that's amazing. And we're learning how to compete with, so far, no years with We the People yet. That's fantastic. Okay, St. Ignatius of Antioch in Ohio, 1st year with We the People, and you're excited to bring it to your classroom. We're excited for you. And you're hoping to gain knowledge about how the competition works, how to prepare your students, and helping them develop a love of learning about government. That's so perfectly encapsulated, Carmen. All right. Any others who want to share? Hi, Hernan. Hernan also works with me at the Center for Civic Education. And he's excited to hear all of the best practices too.
And he's being modest. He's the children's favorite everything.
Yeah, he's kind of a local rock star to them. Kelly just joined the Center for Civic Education last week, I think, or the week before. She was previously in support of Howard County, Maryland's We the People program for 5 years. Or I'm sorry, 5th grade for over 15 years. Hi, Donna. And Donna also works for Center for Civic Ed, and she came from a extensive experience teaching in middle school. So we're really excited to be able to bring this to all of you.
Everyone.
Hi. And Derek, he is our brand new state coordinator for Oklahoma. And this is his first year being the program coordinator. And so he's looking to learn more and immerse himself in the community. That's lovely. Thank you, Derek, for joining us. All right. Well, for everyone else, we are looking forward to getting to know you. Nick from Halfway, Oregon, first year teaching We the People, and hoping to fill the gaps from training I got this summer. We're so glad you did the summer training. Love it. All right. Well, thank you so much for giving us all a little bit of background about kind of who you are and how much experience you've got. We are definitely going to be sharing resources and tips and tricks for middle school as well as high school. So we're going to cover it all. So thank you all very much for sharing that. All right, so moving on, we are going to kind of get into our first substantive pieces here, transitioning from classroom to competition. All right, so Ashley, would you like to give us the rundown here before we watch a little clip of a video?
Yes. Okay. So one of the things that we're thinking about is we might have used the curriculum, we might have used the textbook, we might have heard about it, and we might have even done some simulated congressional hearings in our classroom. But the purpose of this boot camp is to really help you understand the benefits of the competitive aspect of the We the People program and how that will enhance learning for your students. And we just kind of have a bulleted list here of some of the things that really kind of take the We the People program to the next level. The first thing I'll tell you is when it comes to like getting out of their seats, not doing the traditional, lecture style. This is the most engaging activity you can do with your students. And even though I have a dedicated We the People class, I use elements of the simulated congressional hearings across all of my classes because it's just such a transformative educational experience for students. And it's something that they will remember for the rest of their lives. It helps them with goal setting. 3 of the big skills when I talk about the program is I tell them it teaches them to be collaborative, teaches them to be critical thinkers. It helps them with their public speaking skills. I've had students that I had, in 9th or 10th grade that said the only word they said to me all year was, "Hi, my name is so-and-so." And then they signed up for We the People. And I was like, oh my Lord, what is about to happen? And they came alive. Like, it's just amazing to see. It exposes them to new ideas. And as many of you know, in our current political climate, civil discourse is sometimes, a lot of times, not something that's as valued. And this teaches that. It teaches them to hear the other side, not just to hear, but to listen, to appreciate, but also to challenge, but to do so with evidence, with support, and to do so respectfully. This program is a huge networking opportunity. The video, Emily's going to show a portion of this video. It's a longer video, but it's kind of like my promo video for We the People. And the student that you're going to see, that she's going to show the clip of, when he was interviewing for something called the Washington Internship. It's for communications majors interested in political science routes for communication. He was interviewing, and one of the last questions he got asked was, what kind of got him into this? And he's like, well, actually in high school, I was part of this program called We the People. And his interviewer threw her desk down, and she was a We the People student in another state. And he's convinced that that was the moment that got him the internship. So it's definitely a networking opportunity, fosters those teamwork skills. And like I said, it really it stands out, and it made a difference years ago when I started it, but I feel like the world and the nation are starting to pay attention to this program, maybe even more than before. So colleges, universities, jobs, internships, they're paying attention to this program and why it's important for students.
All right. So with that being
So
said,
yeah, so I'll give a little preview. So this video I talk at the beginning, we're going to skip that part. And then basically I asked all my former students to give me a 10 to 20 second clip of why We the People. And of course, this student in his true journalistic integrity took like 3 minutes, but here's the shortened version of it.
I do love the jazzy music at the start.
Oh yeah, there's jazzy music. Yeah.
That's going to convince anybody to join your class. There we go.
Take it. Hi, I'm Tyler Olson, and I'm a politics reporter for FoxNews.com. That's largely thanks to Mrs. Vasic and her We the People and AP Gov classes. Mrs. Vasic, or Miss Wiz, as I know her, is an incredible teacher who not only does an amazing job helping you understand what she teaches, but she truly cares about her students as people. The knowledge and credits I got from We the People and AP Gov also helped me get ahead in college and graduate early. And I still use what I learned, like how legislation moves through Congress, how to read Supreme Court opinions, and the scope of presidential powers every day in my job. But that matters less than the experiences you get from her classes. From debates with my classmates in AP Gov to touring the US Capitol and seeing live Supreme Court oral arguments in We the People, Mrs. Vasic's classes helped me build a passion for our country and how it works. They made me a better citizen. We the People and AP Gov also built the writing, research, teamwork, and public speaking skills that I needed for my broadcast journalism major and my fast-paced, writing-based job. I promise you won't regret taking one of Mrs. Vasic's government and politics classes.
So when he talks about his fast-paced job, he currently works in the US Capitol, and you can see him very often kind of rushing Kevin McCarthy when he's coming in and out of his office with the little reporter microphones and stuff. That's what he does now. So I think we all have one or a few handful of students that are kind of like our success stories, and hey, we did good there. And that Tyler's definitely mine.
Could I jump in for just a sec?
Please.
Yeah,
Yes, please.
to go on to Ashley's point, I co-sign everything she just said. One of the things I really want to emphasize as well is how transformative the curriculum and the competition can be for students even beyond those who want to go into like political science, government, or even everything is a civically related field, even if students don't realize it. And some of the most touching letters or messages that I've gotten from students who have graduated from our program have been from engineers and doctors talking about how going into advanced undergraduate or graduate programs, the We the People program, helped them with their research skills and their confidence, and also their listening ability. One of my former students particularly talked to me about how it was so helpful in nursing, being able to listen to diverse medical opinions, to really kind of evaluate all of the facts, and how she's so much more confident in her interactions with her patients and other nurses and doctors because of the program. So even if students are like, well, I don't want to be a lawyer, you don't have to be a lawyer to really get a lot from this program and to grow exponentially through the competition.
Thanks, Megan. Well, if you all want to see the whole video, I'm sure Ashley would be more than happy to to share it. Okay, so hopefully this is like great. You're already in. You're excited about competition. So let's dig in a little bit about which adventure will you choose. So those of you who are millennials or Gen X, the Choose Your Own Adventure books were fantastic. So how will you choose your own adventure for competition? There's a bunch of different levels that can all kind of build upon each other, depending on how far you choose to take this. And at the end of the day, if you just want to do an in-school simulated congressional hearing, that's awesome. We're not here to say that one of these levels is any better or worse than the others. Doesn't matter. It's the one that you feel comfortable with and excited about, that your kids are going to feed off of your excitement to go to that place with competition. So the in-school option is very much the DIY option. We will talk more about how you do that in just a bit. There, in many states, ideally all states, but some states maybe not, there will be a regional and state level competition. So we'll talk a little bit more about that. Those are going to be organized by your state coordinator. So every state should have a state coordinator of the We the People program. And among other things, that person is responsible for doing trainings to teach teachers how to use We the People in the first place and to organize state level competitions. The regional option exists in some states, not all states. So we can talk about that one-on-one, and I'm going to have my info in the chat in just a bit. If you participate at the state level in high school and you happen to win at your state, as Megan and Ashley have done, you can then advance to a national competition for high school students. For middle school students, this works a little bit differently, and we'll talk about that in just a second too. All right, so taking a quick snapshot of last academic year, 34 states held competitions. So this would be the high school level competitions. And we had 48 high school teams participating at the national final for high school students. We had 14 middle school teams participate in the national invitational, which again, we'll give you more details in just a second here. But first things first, let's rewind and look at the in-school entry-level competition. All right, so for you to do this in your own class, or if you are in a position where you and other teachers in your same grade are all doing We the People, you can organize your own We the People competition. And in brief, here are your steps. You would figure out which classes are going to be involved. If it's just you, that makes it real easy. If it's you and 2 or 3 other teachers, figure out which classes are going to be involved in this adventure. You're going to pick a date because you're going to end up working backwards to plan based on the date of your event. So if this is the extreme point, you're not going to pursue a state level competition, a national invitational, you can make this date whenever you want to do it. So people participating at the national events, they're going to have a more structured schedule. But if you are doing this with, just you, just your fellow 8th grade teachers, just your fellow 12th grade teachers, and you want to make this the last thing the kids do right before, the Christmas break or right before spring break, that's great. You can kind of work backwards from that point. You can also then choose which questions you want to use. So in a subsequent session, we will show you where to find a whole host of previously used questions that you can handpick which ones you want your kids to cover. So you'll pick your questions, provide the students with those questions, and get the students rolling on preparation. At a later point, depending on when you've scheduled this event, you're going to want to invite administrators, outside guests, folks who are going to serve as your judges. And we have lots of material that you can use to invite your judges and give them the background that they need to prepare for what's going to happen. Of course, you're going to book the rooms you need for competition day, whether that's the school library, if you need to block several classrooms to use, that's good to know. And then train your volunteers. This is a kind of broad view here, and we will cover this a great deal more in session 3. All right, Fawn, this is a great question. If this is simply within one school, say the social studies department, would the classes compete against each other, or would it be a showcase to the community? And I would say it can be whatever you need it to be. If you want the classes to compete against each other because you think the kids will respond to that and the kids will, kind of up their game a little bit because they're competing with the other classes, absolutely. You can have the judges give them scores. You can, choose winners that way. If the scoring is less important to you and the thing that you want to get out of it is the students to have the experience to sit across from judges and to feel like they're capable of having a conversation with adults about constitutional issues, that's great too. That, as you point out, that's called a showcase, and that is 100% an acceptable and wonderful thing to do. So thank you for pointing that out, and you could really go either way with it.
And let me just add one thing about the showcase piece. One other thing that I think, even if you decide to do it like in the non-competitive way, just in your classroom, I would encourage you to invite the students, guardians, parents, and some community members to watch, because I will tell you, the only thing better than watching the kids do this is watching their parents and guardians' faces going, I didn't know my kid knew that. And it's almost as good as the excitement on the kid's face when they hear a question and they know the answer. So I would definitely encourage you to invite those stakeholders to watch it happen.
Yep.
I absolutely agree. This past year, I was in a unique position where I had enough students to make up 2 We the People competitive teams. And so they competed against each other through the state competition, where one qualified for nationals and the other didn't. And so what happened then was I wanted, even though our state competition was in January, I wanted all of my students to continue to have that We the People experience, even if they weren't going to the national competition. So from that point forward, the students that didn't move on to the national competition prepared for a showcase. We invited parents, guardians, and a lot of outside like community stakeholders. And at first I was really nervous because, it's one level of accountability to know that you're going to a competition is the next stage. So I knew most, if not all, of my competition team members were going to be pretty motivated to stay on task. But teaching seniors who are just moving to a showcase and not a competition, as we inch closer and closer to graduation, I was a little concerned, their focus and being like, well, we're not the competition team. But knowing that all of these stakeholders were going to be there and that they're still being held accountable, it made them just as motivated and just as nervous. And in some instances, I think there were elements of that non-competition team that even surpassed some elements of the competition team. So regardless of the format, I think it's just so much more of a realistic accountability system that your students will grow either way that you choose to do it.
Absolutely. And so, like I said, in session 3, we'll get into a lot more of the details about how you can do this and some sample timelines, depending on the number of classes you want to involve, things like that. So yeah, we really encourage you, if nothing else, just do this. All right, so if you feel like taking the next step and getting involved in a state level competition. All right, firstly, do you know your state coordinator? And if you do not know your state coordinator, you've never met them, you've never heard of this concept until tonight, please drop me a note in the chat and I can make sure that I can connect you to your state coordinator. The questions for high school students, these are created new every year by our team and others at the Center for Civic Education. Those questions drop at the end of August. And so we are looking forward to that this year, the week of August 28th. The competition questions for the state level will come out. We produce 3 questions for each unit. Typically what happens is the state coordinator might choose 1 or 2 of those questions to use at the state level competition. It's different in every state, so that's why I'll connect you to your state coordinator. The dates and the times for the state events are also dictated by the state coordinator. So they will choose a location. It's often someplace very central. Sometimes it's at the state capitol, but they'll communicate with you, when is this happening? What time is this happening? So that you can get your students ready using that timeline. Some states hold middle school competitions. So again, on a state-by-state basis, we'll get you connected. But a state level middle school competition is not necessary to move on to the National Invitational. All right. So some FAQs that I often get for the regional and state level. Okay, who gets to do this? So you can compete with students in any grade from 6th to 12th. And quite frankly, if your middle school is 5th grade, you could do it with 5th graders. That's also totally fine. So anything goes there, because of course, every state is on a slightly different schedule with when you teach civics and when you teach government. So there is no hard and fast rule about you must compete as a 12th grade student. How big or small is a competitive team? It's technically unlimited. So depending on, if you have a class that is an elective class, it might be on the smaller side, it might be on the really big side. Either of those things are totally fine. I will say that it is often easiest if you have the ability to choose a team size, that if you want to aim for 3 to 4 students on a panel, that's kind of the sweet spot. On teams that are smaller than that, the students will often need to sit on more than one unit panel, which means twice the work for the students. So it's doable, it's hard, but it's doable. And then for very large teams, if you have panels of 5 or 6 kids, then it can sometimes feel hard for the kids to all feel like they're participating equally in the experience. Fawn asks another fabulous question. Are the students for the panels chosen by their peers or by staff members? And then, Ashley, I'll read your response. It depends on the school. My class is open enrollment. I choose their unit teams and they choose their units. And we will talk a lot in session 2 about different strategies for getting the right kid on the right unit panel. There's a lot of different ways you could do it. And I promise we're going to get into more of those strategies in session 2. So another question is, can you combine classes in order to participate in competition? And the answer is yes, you can also combine classes, with the caveat that if that's going to become incredibly big, it might become a little bit much to manage, but it is possible to combine classes. And do we allow club teams? Some states do allow club teams to participate at the state level, particularly in middle school. And for the National Invitational, we would also accept a club team at the middle school level. As of this moment, clubs are not part of the high school national competition. I will not say that will be true forever, but it's true for right now. So those are just some of the questions that we'll often get. And if you would like clarity on any of that, I'm happy to help. All right, so last but not least, national level competition. So to advance as a high school team, you would first, potentially, you would need to win at the at your state level. So Ashley would have her team win at the Maryland state competition. Megan's team would win at the Kentucky state competition. And then they would advance to the nationals. We also, if you were paying attention to the earlier slide that said we had 34 state competitions, but 48 teams that went to the nationals last year. In situations where we do not have a state competition in a particular place, that would open an opportunity for a team from another state to take that place. So in a best case scenario, we would have 50 high school teams from 50 states, and the whole nation would be represented in that way. We don't necessarily have that. So if a state cannot or chooses not to advance a team to the nationals, we have what's called a wild card system, where we will invite the second place high school team from a state competition to also attend the national competition. So those other 14 teams last year that went to the nationals were wild card teams. So they were second place teams. So this is to say that if you happen to live in a highly competitive state where it might seem like, oh, such and such a team always makes it to nationals, it's still worth participating at the state level, because there are often other opportunities for a team to advance. So
Those wild card teams,
yeah,
gotta watch out for them. They're wild for a reason.
It's true. Oh my goodness. Now for the middle school invitational, as I've mentioned before, they do not necessarily have to participate in a state competition, because not every state has middle school state competitions. The invitational is, quite frankly, the middle school optional. If this is a thing you want to do with your middle school team, we are happy to have you do it. So this is a virtual event. It also takes place in the spring. Next year, this will take place in early May. And anyone who wants to participate can do it. So 6th grade, 7th grade, 8th grade, club team, bring it on. So the students will do the competition in that way. But we're really excited to have 14 teams last year and looking forward to having even more this year. I will say for the middle school invitational, the Center for Civic Education also creates those competition questions. Those tend to come out around Thanksgiving. And Amanda, can I submit 3 to 4 teams from a single school for the middle school invitational? I will say yes, with a caveat. So we had this last year. We had a school that submitted 3 teams, which was fine. If we come up with a situation where we have 75 middle school teams, then we'll probably need to figure out how to have you choose one of those teams as your representative team. But at this phase of where that particular competition is at, yes, you can submit multiple teams for that event. All right. And Amanda says there is no qualification. You would have to check with your state first. So if there is a middle school state competition, I would recommend that you do it. Even though you don't necessarily need to win at the state level, it is very good practice for your students to have had experience with competition at least once before they go through the invitational experience. So, you know, it's not to say that you can't be successful if that option is not available to you. You certainly can, but I would highly recommend, if you can give the students at least one round of competition, you should do it. And Amanda, thank you for the background. So some states will do showcases for their middle schools. They don't necessarily have a competition, but they'll do a showcase where students can participate from other schools. That's totally fine. So if you've done a showcase, it still counts towards the student's level of experience, speaking to judges, preparing their statements. It's still really good, that good entry level experience for the students to build upon when they reach the invitational level. Great questions, thank you. So I will answer Derek's question here in the chat, but I want to make sure I hand things over to Ashley and Megan, who are going to kick off a bit of a discussion about key skills and core knowledge.
All right, everyone. So this is where, you know, you're at this place, you're like, okay, I think I've got this. This sounds like a great idea. how now, brown cow, how do I then move forward in preparing my students for this in-school, regional, state showcase competition, whatever we're deciding to do. And there are a lot of different ways you can begin this, but what I really want to emphasize is, as civics educators, even if you're still at the collegiate level or you're just starting out, you're doing a lot of this already. So it's just about thinking about, how do I do this? And then how can I target it towards the particular skills I want my students to demonstrate in that simulated congressional hearing format. So first and foremost, as with any good program that asks students to really think about issues and develop a strong argument in response to an essential question or set of essential questions, you really want to focus on that research and critical thinking aspect. As we all know, all solid arguments are the ones that aren't just opinions, but they have an argument based on a wide variety of resources and data points to substantiate that argument. And so emphasizing to students that their research should be varied, that it shouldn't all be from one source, that if they're pulling in different political perspectives, that it's good to show a spectrum of perspectives and not just have it be something that is representing one particular side of a multifaceted argument. And so with that in mind, I spend, and I know Ashley does as well, a significant amount of time in my classes, even just showing students like how to identify valuable and valid research sources and how to start sifting through everything that's available to them, particularly on the internet. The second thing that's been touched on a great deal is teamwork. If you're planning to have your students participate in a hearing in some way, you don't always have to practice just by doing simulated congressional hearings. The more that they're in small groups, talking to each other, supporting each other, reporting back to the larger group or to you or to even another small group, fosters that sense of teamwork that they'll need to support each other when they're being held accountable in front of their guardians, their teachers, or outside stakeholders.
All right. Something else that's really important to this process is the public speaking and the presentation aspect. But the one thing you want to make that will make a lot of your students maybe feel more comfortable is that this isn't a speech contest. They're not in any way expected to memorize. We're going to get into later sessions what all of that means, but they don't have to memorize their 4-minute speech. And in fact, it's maybe better if they don't, but at the same time, we don't want them holding their notebook in front of their face like this or looking down like this the whole time. We want to foster that experience, and judges have to be able to hear them. And one of the things that I will be doing next year after being in a room at nationals with the loudest air conditioning unit on the face of the earth is I will be putting the loudest air conditioning unit I can find behind them during practice and making them be loud enough over it. So just teaching them that sometimes what they think is loud is not very loud, and also how to be loud without yelling across the table. And it just teaches those skills that are going to be really helpful to them in the future. I had a former I had a gentleman in the community that used to help coach my team. And one of the things that he was obviously an older gentleman. And one of the things he hated was when people used filler words. So, or, and he brought this gorgeous glass bell in. And every time a student would say one of those words, he would ring this bell. And I'm telling you, it was Pavlov's dogs, like all over again. And my students from those years when he used to coach them, they still talk about that beautiful glass bell and wonder what happened to it. But they say they had nightmares about it for years. But they learned how to not use those filler words and, have those good public speaking skills. So all of that kind of comes into play as well, which is going to help them later in life, no matter what they decide to do. And then one of the last things, and I think is one of the great kind of legacies of being a teacher and a student in this program, is we want to foster authentic civic education. We want to foster a love of of country, but also a love of constitution and of government and of the way things work, and a love of understanding why we're here and how our voice matters and our vote matters and all of those great things that it seems like we've lost, that we want to get back. And we need to start with the younger generations to build that back up. And I think that a lot of students don't know how to have a good, positive, civil dialogue about really difficult issues, because what they see on social media and in the news and maybe around their dinner table is a yell fest. They don't necessarily, or just, like a put down one after the other. So this program really promotes those skills of empathy, being open-minded, understanding the opposite perspective, being able to understand that you don't have to fit in a cookie cutter role. You can believe this, but also believe this. And those two things might not seemingly go together, but that's okay. And so I think that's one of the great things about this program, is that it fosters those two key skills.
Mhm. Okay, so considering on kind of with the details of things, and again, as Emily and Ashley have also said throughout the program tonight, we will be giving more specific details about, like, excuse me, the resources and procedures that we use in class. But if you have any questions, please feel free to keep throwing them in the chat tonight. When we look at elements of core knowledge, that data that students should consider when formulating their own argument and supporting it, the first thing that we always want them to go to is the constitutional framework. The number of times I have had to remind my We the People students that the name of the course, and they always think it's so cheesy because it's on the front of the textbook, but I'm always like, it's We the People, the citizen and the Constitution. And so you'd be surprised because you think it's a constitutional class. How could they not be going to the Constitution? But they get so excited to dig into all these other resources that at the end of the day, the more that they can understand and articulate and apply constitutional principles and specific elements of the Constitution when applicable, the stronger their arguments are going to be. This helps not only in the competition, but when we think about civically engaged people, the fact that over 50% of Americans can't list all of the rights protected in the First Amendment or identify how many justices are even on the Supreme Court, that's vital knowledge that they need to be active and engaged citizens. So the more they can go back to that framework, the better. On top of that, understanding how many branches of government there are, very important, but also what are the powers and limits and checks on each of those branches. Again, it's the understanding the intricacies of how our government functions at a national, state, and local level on a day-to-day basis that helps students become content experts to make recommendations for changes or provide solutions to ongoing problems. Continuing on the Bill of Rights and the amendments, not only what rights are stated, but also what rights are inferred in those amendments, looking specifically at, for example, privacy, as well as others, deconstructing what the Bill of Rights meant when the framers wrote them in the 1780s and 90s, and how that framework has maybe changed or the application has varied over time. And then the kind of last bit is that as much as it is about the Constitution, the founding documents, the Articles of Confederation, Declaration of Independence, and my particular nerdy favorite, the early state constitutions, which I will die on the hill that early state constitutions are so critically important, really give students exposure to the intention of the people who help create those principles and framework, but also then be able to evaluate it in a very modern context. Of course, as Emily mentioned in the chat, these are not, most of my students couldn't even tell you anything about the legislative process when they get to me. They might know how many branches of government there are, but it's the opportunity to take the time to dive into those intricacies in class, that is really special and transformative.
Okay, so some other things that they need to know, or that they will learn, I guess, in this core knowledge is they're going to talk a lot about historical context. And one of the great things, and we'll talk about this in later sessions too. I know we really are giving you a lot of teasers tonight, but that was totally intended and on purpose. But we're going to talk about how the We the People units kind of foster all of this this core knowledge, but historical context. So what got us to 1787? I had the pleasure this summer of reading about 50 of the 85 Federalist essays and almost the entirety of Madison's notes on the Constitution. Fascinating, but very wordy. So, you know, letting your kids kind of dive into what they were thinking then, and things like who was there, who wasn't there, who was included, who wasn't, and all the inferences that we make. Yeah, not at all, Em. Then we talk about landmark Supreme Court cases. This is probably my favorite place, where we talk about not only how the court has applied constitutional principles and interpreted them, but how the court changes over time, and how the dynamics of the court, you know, from the Marshall era to the Berger era to the Warren era to the present day, the Roberts court. It's just fascinating. And if you have students that are really into case law, they're really going to love Unit 5, but we'll talk about that later on. Civil rights and civil liberties. This kind of goes along with what Megan was talking about with the Bill of Rights. And one of the important things, a lot of things that students don't know is they've heard these phrases, but they don't know the difference between a civil right and a civil liberty. So that's something that is really kind of enlightening to them in this class. Talk about civic responsibilities. Usually my students are very, especially in maybe the last 5 years, are very jaded and cynical, and their vote doesn't matter. They can't make a difference. Oh, right to the heart of a government teacher. So, you know, teaching them that voting is just the beginning, that it is important, but there's a million and one other ways that they can get involved. And the other thing that is really awesome about this program, and that students really, really love, is the discussion of contemporary issues. One thing's for sure, even though the 18 to 24-year-old crowd might not vote as much as we would like them to, they are talking about politics. They might not even realizing it, but they are really, Pew Research and the data is showing, like, they are on social media, on the TikTok, as I call it, all the things. They're out there making their voices heard about what's going on, and they want to talk about how this document, as they would say, how this old thing still matters today and can still be applied to the changing nature of society, and things the founders could have never imagined existing in society. So all of these things, like Emily pointed out in the chat, like Emily said, or like Megan said, these aren't things that students need to come into your class knowing. And in fact, they will probably only know the very little bit. Hopefully your state cares about social studies in elementary, but we're still working on that. So they'll know very little, usually. Hopefully they know there's 3 branches. We'll start there. But these are the things that the We the People program teaches them.
Thanks. And I wanted to highlight as well, Karen asked if it was possible to get some of these slides, and we will share with you after tonight. We'll share the whole slide deck with you. So if you want to share some of the core knowledge pieces with your students, you certainly can. If you feel like you want to share some of the slides with the benefits to your school board, your admins, whoever you feel like needs to see it, you have access to it. All right. Oh, and Fawn, I want to answer this question as well. So Fawn's niece is in elementary school and uses Project Citizen, and she's not sure if that's related, but she learns this too. So yes, Project Citizen is the other flagship program of the Center for Civic Ed, and they are essentially sister programs where We the People is focused on, kind of the what of government, and the Project Citizen is kind of the how. So that, for those of you not familiar, that program will guide students through the process of identifying a community issue and recommending a public policy solution to that issue. All right, so I'm going to hand it back to Ashley and Megan for discussion time.
Okay. So, one of the things, sorry, I just lost what slide I'm looking at, so that's great. One of the things that we wanted to discuss would be strategies. How do we develop these skills amongst our students? How do we reinforce them? And how do we do it in a way, this is the hardest thing for me every year. How do we do it in a way that's accessible, where students don't feel like they're overwhelmed from the get-go? How can we kind of guide them through these really complex understandings and help them feel confident that they are experts going down the road? So I think the next slide then, or are we just talking about that? I can't remember.
Yeah, I think I would also love to hear from the participants. If there
Yes,
are
sorry.
any, I'm going to go back a slide.
Yeah, if you want to throw it in the chat, or if you
Yeah.
feel comfortable just using your speaking voice, you can do that. If you've been teaching all day, you're like, no, thank you. But if you want to just throw in the chat, what are some strategies that you might currently use in your classroom, or ideas that you might have for these skills and kind of core knowledge that we've been talking about? How might you use, how might you develop these skills in your students? Just any ideas you have, something you've done before, something that's spinning around in your brain, you can throw it in the chat or talk away. We are here to hear. My East Coasters are already asleep, but there is at least some like not Pacific time zone people or whatever. It's like mid-afternoon snack time, you know,
Ashley's ready for it.
ready for it.
That's afternoon snack time is when I am the sleepiest. Like, you put me in
Okay.
a meeting all day. I get home at 3 o'clock. I totally get it. And I'm like a zombie.
I haven't slept in 2
Wake up
nights because I'm still on Hawaii time and I'm like desperately like I'm wide awake right now, but by morning time I'm like, is it time to go to bed? Like it's been terrible. So, okay, well, I'm going to break the ice then and just share a strategy, and then maybe someone will feel more comfortable throwing something in the chat. So one of the things that I like to do with my students, especially for this program, is something, and you guys may have heard of it. It's a protocol called philosophical chairs. Basically, you give them a topic, like what should we do with or how should we solve immigration policy? I usually pick something really broad, and I usually pick something that's pretty divisive, because those are some of the topics that we discuss in the We the People program. And you set chairs up on either side of the room facing each other. They sit in the chairs, they face each other, and then there's like we call the model runway down the middle. And basically, on one side, a student makes a point, the other side can respond, but the key elements of this is once one student talks, they can't speak again until another student on their side has spoken. So it teaches them to stop and listen. And also, before each student says their piece, like if Megan and I are on opposite sides and Megan just said something, I have to say, what I heard you saying, Megan, is, and I have to paraphrase what she said before I state my position. Just that whole part of speaking, listening, all those things. And the other cool thing that I add to my element, and you can add to your element of it too, is I allow students to pick side or to choose change sides. So like if Megan and I are on opposite sides, maybe someone on my side makes a really excellent point and Megan's like, oh yes, she can switch and go sit on the other side. Yeah, and someone came into the chat. I just had to talk. Debating, yes. I love debating with students. They love to do that. Teach them how to do it. Make sure you don't just throw them to the wolves. Make sure you give them.
Yes. Debating is actually my like final stage of civil discourse that we use, because they all come into my class thinking it's just going to be a debate class, like all my little future lawyers of America, like, I can't wait to argue. I'm so good at it. I always win all the fights. And it's like, well, okay. Good, I guess. But one of the things that I really try to do before we get to the actual debating of arguments, that I emphasize, so this would even be before like a philosophical chairs, which I love that methodology as well, is to really emphasize that we want to start with constitutional conversations rather than partisan or political ones. And so I always like to say, okay, well, if I might project a topic. Let's go with immigration. On a post-it note, write what you think about immigration. Like, what do you think we should do? And then step back and say, okay, here's your original opinion. Let's go back and look at what the Constitution actually says about this. If the Constitution doesn't say anything specific, what do the principles of constitutionalism, what do the statutes say? What about executive orders? What do the courts say? And then go back. And so you're integrating that debating element before they even get to talking to each other. And then, like Ashley, they could reverse their perspectives, they could modify it. Yes, I am a devotee to the civil discourse book that Emily just mentioned in the chat. And they have a great PDF on their website for the book that actually talks about the discussion or the differences between like a conversation, a discussion, and a debate, and how you can help students go through that process. And when I read it like a year or two ago, totally transformed how I approach the whole thing. Structured academic concept controversies are also great formatting for that.
Yeah, these are great. And I mean, I realized I was the one that put it in the chat, but if you're not already comfortable and confident having having full debates with your students, the civil discourse book does a great job of kind of going from the point of where do we start with discussion, and then moving from discussion to where we can have civil discourse and debates with each other. So there's a lot of really good entry level activities, because the debates and discussions, they can work really well, especially with older students, but for younger students, you might really need to get them comfortable with the whole idea. And that's before you even launch into topics of potential political controversy. So there's a lot of fun practices in there about, you know, having a discussion about, is a hot dog a sandwich?
Yeah, I saw him speak about this book at a
Yeah.
conference, and that was the thing. He's like, until your kids can civilly discuss their favorite ice cream flavor and whether or not a hot dog is a sandwich, you cannot debate gun control with them. Like, you don't start out of the gate with something like that. They need to be able to debate something simple and something that's arguable, like that to begin with.
I also think, and coming from a state that is currently having these conversations legislatively and within the public education system as a whole, there's a lot of hesitance. I worked with teachers who are new to the We the People program this summer throughout the state of Kentucky. And so many of them asked, well, what about the laws that are restricting the types of things that we can talk about in class, or how we approach them? And so starting with a point of having a discussion or discourse makes it less, I don't want to say hostile, but sometimes debates can become more antagonistic. And so focusing then on these basic questions to reinforce that discourse and those traits or norms, and then carrying them through to when you do feel your students are more comfortable, will make it less antagonistic. And I think also make you as the teacher and the students feel a little bit safer in having the more complex conversations.
So thank you all so much. And Derek also put in the chat different perspective taking activities. Yeah, 100%. So thank you all. Like these are really great entry exercises for the students to kind of get them warmed up for some of these skills that we're really trying to develop further with We the People. All right, so back to Ashley and Megan and our interdisciplinary connections.
Yay. So my favorite thing about this slide is the title is like your admin's favorite buzzword. Like, how are you using interdisciplinary connections? And you're like, I'm a social studies teacher. I do that by nature. Students read and write more in my class than in any other class you teach in this building, but that's okay. That's why you should value us more. But anyways, this program in particular, We the People, connects to so many other disciplines. Obviously, your social studies related disciplines like history, government, political science. When we start in later sessions talking about the 6 units, they kind of move from 1 through 6 as more historical to more government-y and politicky. That's where I like to be. My favorite little analogy, I guess, is that history is the flesh and government and politics is the bones. I'm a bones girl. But everyone's got to have their special niche. Obviously, it's going to talk about law, about legal studies, but then you're also going to have those English aspects. We got the writing skills, the research skills, those kinds of things. Current events, contemporary issues, that's going to be really important. Ethics, philosophy comes into it. I mean, there are some questions in Unit 1 where they're reading Cicero and Aristotle and, things like that, at least at the high school level. And then the E word that always freaks me out, economics. Ugh. I think I get to that unit every year and I'm like, can we get through this as quickly as possible? But it's definitely a great connection to this program. And I'll let Megan share anything else she wants to share about these connections as well.
I am the history girl. So between the two of us, you have all of the elements there. I think one of the other things, and I was going to put it on this slide, and it's like, oh, it's going to take too long for me to type it out. So I'll just explain it here, is that because the students are working together and coming up with their own examples and applications, it gives students a lot of freedom to delve into how these complex topics impact potentially like where they want to go in the future. I teach this course to seniors, and this past year I had had a student who is now at West Point, and so a lot of her examples dealt with like military procedures or applications, legislation, executive orders related to active service, military operations, and veterans affairs. A few years ago, there was a question for Unit 6. I can't remember if it was at nationals or at the state competition for the high school level that talked about environmental policy. And I had all these students in AP environmental science who were like, we've got this, let us tackle this question. And it was just so enriching to see them in competition, explaining not just like, well, this is what this law says, but actually being able to talk about specific regulatory practices about like carbon emissions and get into the science of it. And I might not know if they're right, but they sound so good. But I usually then reach out to our science teachers, our statistics experts in the building to have them fact check everything too. So anything you can think of will come through in the We the People course.
And I definitely want to make sure that the middle school teachers also feel like there's possibilities here as well. And it depends a lot on, how your school is structured and how open your fellow teachers are to collaboration. But in particular, your ELA teachers would be fantastic partners for you if you are embarking upon this, even at the in-school level, because we're asking students to write argumentative essays. And maybe they've never done this before. Maybe they're 4 very different people trying to cram everything together. And it's not reading well as a statement when the students read it. There's a really just good opportunity to pull in the English departments to say, hey, let's work collaboratively on this so that the students, not only gain the information for, the research side of things, but also the skills on good writing. And, those are skills that are going to translate no matter what. But those interdisciplinary crossovers are 100% possible.
Emily, I'm glad you said that. The 8th grade teacher that feeds our high school, his We the People students actually write their statements in their English class. So All of the social studies aspect happens in his room, but they write the statements and they hone those, really good skills of writing in their English class. And that's a little more possible, I think, at the middle school level, which I wish we had that at the high school level, because usually, don't take me if I'm wrong on this, middle school teachers, but usually you guys are organized in teams. So like your social studies kids have the same English teacher and things like that, depending on where. That's how it is in our district. So it makes it easy for those cross-curricular connections.
If I might,
Yes.
I'm Mona Wilson-Floyd, and I'm an English teacher. And I teach 8th grade English, but I teach writing. And that's why I got into this program. I thought I could use it for the informative and argumentative side. I'm going to teach We the People, but I'm going to really incorporate the writing with it. This is what I'm doing. And this is my first year, so it's going to be not my first year teaching, but my first year doing this, because I just see the need in it so much.
So Fawn has asked a great question, and I think it might be worth it to take just a moment to, talk about the structure of how the simulated congressional hearing works. So Fawn's question is, when the students write the statements, do the judges read those, or are those referenced just by the students? So Fawn, just in brief, the students are responding to the questions that are provided to them by you. They will work together to craft an argumentative essay that answers all parts of that question. And then during the simulated hearing, the students will read. They are not expected to memorize, read the statement that they wrote. And then the people serving as judges will ask them follow-up questions based on what the students wrote, in addition to other subject matter. So the judges don't typically see what the students wrote. There might be some situations where we can, talk about why you might want to do that, but it's pretty rare. It's really just for the students to read out as the kickoff point to the hearing process.
Yeah, I always tell my students the judges aren't going to see that, because usually ours are color coded. So students know what part they're reading. And I had a student with dyslexia once. So all of her notes, all of her units notes, when it got to her parts, they were very large and very phonetically spelled out for all of the words. So, and that's just another point, any student can do this program. So they don't have to, their statements can look like a hot mess, and they usually do, but it works for them.
And that's a huge comfort for a lot of my students, particularly those who might struggle with reading, and those who come in absolutely horrified at the idea of public speaking. Having those notes in front of them gives them a stronger sense of belonging and expertise. I have had several foreign exchange students in my We the People classes in the past who English is not their first language, sometimes not even their second or third language. And so in some instances, they would have their part of the opening statement written in their primary language and then in English, in case they get caught up with things. And so I really love the flexibility that is permitted with students not having to submit. I of course have a copy of it, but submit it to the judges in a competitive or showcase setting.
Yeah, that's great, Megan. Thank you. Yeah, there's a lot of different avenues for creativity on your part as the teacher. Whatever's going to make the students feel like they're comfortable, they're confident, and they can do this. That's what we're going for. Okay. So I do want to do a couple of things before we, pause for Q&A and wrap up for tonight. I would love to give you all a sneak peek of session 2. So our next 2 sessions, first August 26th and next September 30th. Those are on Saturdays, but there's a reason for that. So on the 26th, this is going to be a combination of synchronous and asynchronous work. So it's kind of like a synchronous sandwich. We are going to talk a lot of nuts and bolts. We are going to talk through picking unit teams. We're going to talk about study plans and timelines. We will talk about targeted practice sessions and setting up mock competitions to have your students practice. We'll talk about teaching methodologies specific to prepping your students. And we will talk through avenues to provide feedback and strategies for improvement. So just to give you a bit of a thing to look forward to, during the asynchronous time, we would love it if you plan to bring with you the calendar for the fall or spring semester to the extent that you know it, because what we'd love to do is kind of work through and workshop how you want to build your We the People prep into the school year. And so that's going to be different for all of you. And so that's why I say we're going to workshop it during that asynchronous session. But that's what you can look forward to for session 2. And then for session 3, which will happen in September, we will get into this year's competition questions, and we'll get into resource building and how you build your resource library for your students. So that's a bit of a sneak peek for what's ahead. But I definitely also want to remind everybody that registration is separate for each of the 3 sessions. So if you have not already registered for the 26th or September 30th, please make sure you do. All right, so with that, I will open the floor for any questions that you all still have for us this evening. And yeah, we'll be happy to answer a couple questions tonight. And if there are some things that we think we need to get into with greater detail, we will certainly make sure we get into them in the next couple sessions.